You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vet Rehabbers, welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Megan Kelly. Today we are doing one of my Behind the Rehab practices, and we've got Kim Parker from the Wellington Animal Hospital here on the Western Cape in South Africa. And welcome, Kim. Great to have you online.
Thank you. It's such a privilege to be on your podcast.
Kim, now you're in a unique situation because I don't think there are many people that have actually finished their veterinary nursing diploma and then gone on to go and study veterinary physiotherapy. So you've done quite a lot of studying. You're a bit like me because I did my veterinary nursing and then I did vet and then I did my CCRP.
Oh wow! Yeah, I think you can never learn enough. But in the beginning, I actually wanted to be a physio, an animal physio, or some kind of rehab worker. So that's, and then I heard there was a way you could do it if you did vet nursing first. So that's actually why I got into the vet nursing.
And then you went and studied at Equine-Librium, which is in Plettenberg Bay, and that's a 4-year course, isn't it?
Yes, but it wasn't really when we started. So the course I'd looked into or I thought of doing after I'd finished nursing was one in the UK. I don't know if it's there anymore. I don't even know the name. But as I was going through my nursing course and looking at that course, I just realized that it wasn't really enough for me. So it's kind of miraculous that the college in Plettenberg Bay opened up, and then it changed a lot in the years to come. So when we started out, we definitely weren't looking at doing a 4-year degree course. But now in hindsight, I'm so pleased and so glad that it actually progressed to that, and we couldn't have had better people on board.
Now were you the first year?
Yes.
Okay. So were you actually there for 4 years? You just didn't know that when you started. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. If I had known that it would have been 4 years in the beginning, I probably would have chickened out. But I'm glad. I think you can never stop learning now after having done it. It's just amazing. There's just so much to know.
And so now that you're qualified, are you mainly focusing on one species? Are you doing horses or small animals, or are you doing a mixture?
I prefer doing the horses. The small animals I did quite a lot of to begin with. But I think in my situation, working in a large animal mixed practice, having sort of a same amount of vets for smallies and large animals, it was just too complicated trying to be a physio or rehab in the small animal department than as it was for the horses. And I think that, it's difficult to describe because they were never looking at getting a physio in the first place. They just heard that I was a vet nurse and they were short a vet nurse and would I like to come in and work for them? And I said, yeah, sure, but actually physio is my priority. So as long as there's more room for that, then there is. Obviously I did more nursing in the beginning. And they were very kind about it. They said, yeah, sure, you can start off like this, and then as it goes, we can look at getting more people in or something to replace you as a nurse, and that's what happened. And I with the team that we have, we started off with, there were 2 other nurses and then I came along, and now we've got 5 nurses in our one practice, which is the main practice that I work from. And I think that's all happened because of as I was out, they had to get more people in the more I was out. And I'm really, really blessed that the nurses that there were before we had more people, they could sort of fill in for me. Obviously, it was extremely taxing on them. I mean, any kind of vet profession is no joke. But when you're dealing with emergencies and after hours and all that kind of stuff, and you're not there at closing time because you're driving out, 20 k's away or whatever, and there's traffic, and then someone has to sit in there for you. And I think I owe a lot to them for how they have how they've filled in for me as it's gone along, and how it's slowly progressed and developed.
So, I mean, you sound like you've got a lot of supports from the practice, which is awesome. I mean, was it like that initially, and especially from the vet side? I know that, generally veterinary rehab therapists, we struggle to get vets on board. So let alone within our own practice, even just the practices that are referring to us. How were the vets that work there and that own the practice, were they quite open to rehabilitation and physiotherapy, or did it take you a while to actually get them on board?
Oh no, it took me a long time. I think they probably thought it was more of a joke in the beginning, and they thought it would never really develop into anything. And I think it took a lot of perseverance. I didn't really, they never said to me, you have to be here at this time, and you've got to do this amount of nursing work and all of that. Even though that was in the idea in the beginning. The nurses were the ones that took the brunt, and we are very honored that we sort of work things out within our departments. So within our nurses group, or however many nurses there are, we'll talk among each other. If someone's sick, we say, go and rest and whatever for 2 days. I'll take your call, I'll work your hours, because we know it's going to be reciprocated. So like the vets didn't really have much of a say. So maybe I'm lucky in that way, or maybe not, I don't know. But I think in a lot of big practices, the vets are more, this is my practice, this is how things work. But because it's such a large practice with such large variety, and that there are 5 different partners, sort of every group, like the handlers and the nurses and the reception staff and the shop staff and whatever other staff, the large animal, the small animal, they all have to work together within their group.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the practice is got great teamwork, even if it's sort of small teams, and then there's obviously the big team. I think for a lot of vets and vet techs or vet nurses that are in the field of rehabilitation, one of the challenges is to try and start sort of moving towards rehabilitation, especially if they're in a practice already and now they've gone and studied post-grad, so they've done their CCRP, or in your case maybe veterinary physio, and then the practice is actually used to them sort of performing a specific role within the practice, and now they are wanting to branch out and start doing the rehabilitation. In order to be able to grow that other side, you need to give it time. But there's always this tendency just to pull them back into mainstream veterinary. So I think it's a challenge. And I think obviously for you went in there, you weren't established in the practice as a veterinary nurse. So this is maybe a little bit easier for you. How did you... Carry on.
Sorry, yeah, it did take a long time in the beginning. I mean, I remember I only had like 1 or 2 patients for a couple months because no one knew me. I was starting from scratch. Some of the vets, the idea was for them to refer cases to me, but they didn't know me. So how could they, they might be shooting themselves in the foot with that. So unfortunately, you just have to keep nagging. And, if you're there, you're hands-on, the vet says, I want to take an x-ray of the stifle here. Let's sedate it and take an x-ray. Then, be like, well, okay, well, if you don't find anything, or can I have a look at it? But then there's the other side where you've got to wait for the dog to wake up and wait for it to have all its senses about it before you can actually start palpating and doing that. And by then, everyone's bullied the dog into being sedated and x-rayed and everything. So it's not going to be a very pleasant experience for it. But if you have a good relationship as a vet tech or whatever with your vets, and you can go to the vet and say, well, look, if you get a lameness or something, could you bring me in, and I can have a feel and have a look, and we can discuss it and talk about it, and then I can tell you what I feel. Even if the vet or whatever isn't convinced about it, you just say what you think and you leave it there. And then at some point it gets into their consciousness that in a lot of the cases there's not much money for the animal to be treated. So you say, well, rather than going for a TTA or a TPLO, rather why don't you give it to me, the case to me for 2 weeks or something, and we can see if I can rehabilitate it and reassess in 2 weeks and then see where we're at. I have rehabbed quite a few small animals, but it got quite emotional for me, because obviously it's a big team working as a vet and having your patient and the owner, and it's a big, quite emotional team. But then if you have within the same practice, if you have the physio, the vet, the patient and the owner, then it's sort of, well, I find with me anyway, it kind of got lost in communication. That I would, the vet would ask me what's going on, and I would say, well, this is what we've been doing, this is the progress we've seen, but I think we should give it more time. But then obviously it's not as simple as that when the vet goes and speaks to the owner, because the owner's got other concerns and everything, and then the vet gives his opinion, which might be quite a bit different from your opinion. So it's a bit of a large circle, and everything gets a bit lost along the way. So I think the best way is if somebody wants to work as a tech and rehab a patient, they must obviously communicate with the vet, but then also communicate directly with the owner, rather than going through the vet to the owner.
Yeah, so if you sort of just part of the in-house team, then they're not, the client is actually not officially your client. So you don't have that communication, and then everything gets lost in translation. The vet might not completely understand. So looking at your cases now, your equine cases, do you have a few of the vets that refer more to you than the others? Or, I think if I think back to just in the days when I had my practice, even just getting referrals from external practices. So I had my own practice. I remember, the ones that I started to get repeat referrals from were the ones where they'd either sent a case to me, or the client had come to me, and then they'd got the feedback, and they'd realized, actually, I can really, add some benefits to their patients, and they realized what I'm actually doing is working. And so, you must have had that obviously also with your vets that are actually working. So some of them have referred, and then you've had major successes, and they thought, well, I'm going to carry on with this. This is working.
Yeah, it's quite surprising, actually. I've done quite a variety in that, and I get calls occasionally. This is my vet, which is a completely unrelated vet to our vet practice, and they say no, they've heard a lot about the work I've done, and like a dachshund with a disc, for instance, that is paralyzed. I haven't done those for a while within our practice, and I got a call from a completely different vet, and it's just amazing how word travels. That a vet that is meant to be your vet practice's competition is now, because that's the best option they've got. And that's what I find with the vets, even though it's difficult. Like some of the first cases I got were impossible. They really were. I mean, I had a dog who had a dislocated elbow, and it had been dislocated for 2 months because the previous vet that had looked at it hadn't picked that up, but had picked up a laceration on the pad or something. And then, we tried to operate to correct that, but then it also had a contracted tendon and all these things. And in the beginning, when the vets ran out of options, what they could do, then they sort of said, well, here we go. Can you do anything about this? And that was a difficult point to take. But with a lot of those, you've just got to trust your teaching and your judgment, and also look at it realistically. Obviously, if you can make a difference, if there's a chance of that, then go for it. But if not, then then it's good to be honest and say, well, look, I think it's way beyond. But to actually, I don't want to say teach the vets. Well, I suppose it is. It's more educational with at what point we can be useful. I know at the vets, and talking about dogs, by the time the patient comes in, it has got a full-blown cruciate. But if the people can recognize when their dog is maybe not wanting to jump up so much, or maybe struggling to get up, or that slight limp in the morning, and then they can bring them in at that point, then we can have a massive influence on them. But by the point that it's torn, then obviously we can still help it a lot. But the easiest option then would be to go for surgery.
It's really great to see that you're getting referrals from other practices, because that's always one of the worries. Is if you're actually associated with the practice, are other practices in the area going to refer to you? And in my situation, I actually rented a building right next door to another practice. And that was one of the worries when I chose that location. And I must say, I never ever had a problem. People would refer to me and they would just go straight back to their normal vet. So it's great that you're getting referrals from the other practices. I mean, Wellington is quite out in the country, isn't it? I mean, are there many practices? Is it sort of the type of cases that you're treating now, so specifically in the equine? Is it performance horses? What are the type of people that are living in that kind of area?
Well, it's not only that area we service. So Wellington Animal Hospital itself has 3 branches. It has one in Paarl and it has one in Franschhoek. So, that our vet team covers that whole area. Obviously, there are more practices in Paarl. We're the only one in Franschhoek and we're the only one in Wellington. And the horse, in terms of horses, our vets also work in a massive area, all the way up from Porterville to Durbanville, down to Stellenbosch and Somerset West. So it's huge. Obviously, people prefer the vets that they've been working with the whole time and that they trust. And some of our vets have been working so long that they have, way back when, maybe 30 years ago, they were one of the few vets. So they developed that relationship, and it's still active and still present.
So how do you sort your timetable out now? So I mean, it sounds like you've got quite a fair bit of traveling to do. Do they sort of schedule where you should be, or is that all for your own doing?
No, so we work in weekly rotations, us nurses on our on-call hours. So we'll be on call for a week and then work the weekend. So in that week, I will have to be back at 4:00 to take over the patients that are going to be, if there's after hours or if there's a colic that comes in or something else that needs operating on. So then, and within the other weeks, 1 week I will work over our lunch period. So there's someone there at the practice. So in that week, I will have to be there at, say, 12:00. And then on that specific day, because I'd be working through the lunch, then I could finish potentially at 4:00. But because the physio clients is sort of my own, not my own, but I schedule it myself. Often I would be working, until 8:00 at night, and working through lunch through physio as well, depending on how many clients I have. And I do try schedule clients in specific areas. So if I go up to Piketberg, like I'll have 10 clients in one day. And then I won't necessarily want to come back to work. But if I'm in one of those weeks, that I have to be back or I'm on call, then I'll have to come back to work and do the after hours or whatever. So that sometimes it's very difficult, because sometimes you find yourself working long hours and with no respite between it, and then switching from nursing to physio, and that in itself, I mean, I found so difficult in the beginning. It's two completely different professions, and I had to sort of sit down and switch my mind over. Like I don't know if people understand that, but I mean, you've got to think in a completely different way. So you've got to, like, it's almost like you've got to leap over these hurdles onto the other side of your brain and be like, okay, now I'm looking at the patients like this. Whereas when you're doing the veterinary stuff, you're looking at sedating, x-rays, anesthetics, whatever, and there it's all go. Then you jump across to the other side and you've actually got to sit back and look at the patient, objectively and be like, well, this is what I'm seeing, and almost go like internal in your thinking. And that it was very, very difficult. But now I think 4 years I've kind of mastered that big leap, and I can switch over like this. But it took a long time. And the thing is, people don't understand it, because it's very easy to say, oh, you work with animals. But working with animals is one thing. Working in a vet practice is another thing. Working out in the field, trying to fix the animal from a, internal, but at the same time external point of view it's very interesting. You've got to be quick on your feet, and you've got to be able to, open-minded, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine how difficult it must be, because even now, having been a vet and, treating veterinary patients, our default now is when I see a dog walking or a cat walking, I'm just having a look at its movement. Is it lame? If I pat a dog, I'm immediately just palpating down its spine to see if it's sore. The way that your brain thinks is so completely different. And I suppose you as a nurse assisting a vet, now this dog is now coming in here for some oral hematoma or something like that. So it's not in here, but you can see, well, he's not actually walking that well. He looks a bit unbalanced, and he's lost a lot of muscle on that leg, but he's not in there for that. So I can understand some of the challenges that you have. Let's chat quickly about equipment, because I think this is one of the challenges. I think that if we're working for a veterinary practice, we always want nice equipment, because equipment in veterinary rehabilitation tends to be quite expensive, and it's always that challenge to try and convince the owners of the practice or the vets to take that leap and purchase it. Do you guys have any veterinary physiotherapy equipment that you've convinced them to purchase, or has that been for your own expense?
Yeah, look, I was very lucky when I started. I had a lot to begin with. I had a Beamer, and I had a Faratic. I obviously had the TENS machines. But then when I went into the practice, when I came in, I obviously couldn't expect them to buy me everything, because I'm coming in as a nurse and trying to push the physio in the door. And then slowly, as I developed relationships with the vets, especially the partners, and I would just say, if you had this machine, it could make a difference here. And then sort of push it in a bit more. I mean, not that I did it deliberately, but eventually one of the vets just said to me, well, let's buy it.
Awesome. So what did you get?
That was the laser, but I'm not, obviously, it's flippin' expensive having a vet practice with 15 vets, and having each one has to have its own ultrasound and own we've got 3 x-ray units. It's not, 3 x-ray units in our one practice.
Wow.
So it's not, and we're going through renovations and everything. So I think ideally, if I got more equipment, I would like to buy it myself, because then there's always the thing is, they service all my equipment, and they will, if it breaks, they'll get it fixed and all of that stuff, because that's all part of the practice, and all part of the way financially it works. And sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought.
You're saying in future you think you'd rather purchase your own equipment, so although they do the service.
Yes. Yes, I would. Because ultimately, I would maybe like to work on my own, or develop look, I love working with vets, and I really think I would love to work with more vets, more the equine vet side of it, small animal. I'm not saying it's easy, but for some reason, there's a lot less competition and more respect between between those vets, they'll be quite happy to refer. But for some reason, I find in the equine side of it, it's much more competitive. So for me to refer to me working for Wellington Animal Hospital seems like they're kind of giving the client over to Wellington Animal Hospital, which is not the case, because I'm not going to say to a client, if it's referred to me from another vet, I'm not going to say, yeah, contact our vet because he needs to take x-rays or anything. I'm going to say, go back to your vet, whoever you're comfortable with, whoever you've seen before, and then I'll give them options, not within my practice, but within, who's the best in the field, or who's, for instance, arthroscopies. We don't really do arthroscopies. We'll get a vet in to do them if one of our particular vets is not asked, is requested to do one. So Baker and McFay down on the coast, they always do arthroscopies. They do them like on the racehorses all the time, and Drakenstein. So why should we refer to our less advanced practice for that? Whereas with kissing spine operations, maybe it's the other way around.
Yeah, it sounds to me like your passion is obviously from the beginning, it's been in the veterinary physiotherapy side of things. So, I think it sounds like to me you would love to just focus all your energy on that. And although at the moment you're content and happy with the situation where you're doing the nursing, that sort of swapping over is a struggle for you. So, yeah, I must say, I think it's amazing that you've been able to do exactly what you're doing. I think it's amazing that you've studied 2 different courses. And you actually have 2 professions. There are not many people who have got 2 completely different professions. So well done for that. And I wish you all the luck. And I think, you're doing a great job. And I think that the advice, and just from chatting to you, I think that it can really, really help a lot of vet rehab therapists, and especially those that are in similar situations. So best of luck, and you'll obviously let us know. And as soon as you open up your own practice, we'll have you back on the Behind the Vet Rehab practice to discuss the challenges of having your own practice, and not just chatting about the ones when you're within a large veterinary practice like Wellington Animal Hospital.
Thank you very much, Megan. And thank you for your time.
And I hope you recover. Kim actually is at home today because she fell off her horse. So she's all bruised and sore. So I hope you recover and you're feeling a little bit better.
Thanks. I'm already on the road to recovery. Okay.
Cheers, Kim. Bye.
Vet Rehabbers, thanks for listening to my podcast. Don't forget to click the subscribe button, and it would be great if you could leave me a review. I want to know, what are you doing on the 15th to the 17th of November? It is our Vet Rehab Summit, which is our online virtual conference for veterinary rehab professionals. Find out more information at onlinepethealth.com.